Hello there, welcome to the channel, where today we're going to be discussing the next Gigabash story mode, as I will never be truly satisfied. Yeah, I know Final Ascension came out not 4 months ago, but I have a pretty nifty idea for where they could go next. And the last time I made a prediction for Gigabash, I was entirely correct about everything. But in a decision that will forever haunt me, I left that video until too late. So instead of any good cred for investing hours into a theory that all turned out to be completely accurate, I'll forever be known as the guy who thought Jedi Bob was going to die in a LEGO special. Moving swiftly on, I believe that ROJAK has the most potential for a future story mode, so that's what this video is going to be covering. All the reasons why I think a ROJAK chapter could be in the cards. Also, I know full well that we're probably not going to get another story chapter for at least a year. And this isn't based off a leak or a rumour or anything, I just think that there's a lot of potential in this character. I will be including a recap of events, as having the story fresh in your mind makes it easier to understand certain choices and predictions I'll make later, and it's better for both you and me to have a visual key to fall back on. This video will also contain spoilers for Final Ascension, so don't watch it if you haven't gotten that DLC yet. With all that out of the way, let's get into this. Enjoy! So Thundertross made its debut in 2019, and in 2020, nations worldwide pooled their resources to make a whole bunch of Aegis teams, with each vehicle being piloted by a mighty warrior. Then in 2021, Balza arrived on Earth and wiped out most of the mighty warriors and vehicles in its search for Giga Energy. The surviving mighty warriors were then assembled by Kabuto and Dr. Kaneko. Though they didn't get along, Crown then joined the team, and they started to work together. At some point between the Balza attack and the team working together, the main story modes all kick off concurrently, with a few variations. That's a key part of Gigabash. Depending on which character you play as, the game has a different ending. At this point, ROJAK might have encountered Balza, but the line in Final Ascension about him escaping again and ROJAK finally catching up could all be in reference to his first attacks. Either way, ROJAK catches up to Balza in Final Ascension, which also takes place concurrently and could very well not be canon. I doubt it though. And then Balza achieves his ultimate form, evolving into Zargora. Gigaman sacrifices himself to stop Zargora, leaving Thundertross and ROJAK to protect Earth. We'll be referring to this order of events later, when we determine which point in the timeline the chapter is likely to take place in. Okay, so firstly, I think it's going to have ROJAK as the focus instead of an original character. Passion Republic teased Final Ascension in the lore section of both ROJAK and Balza, which indicates that they'd been planning that DLC story for at least a year and a half. However, the obvious roadblock is that ROJAK is formed from multiple smaller vehicles, which means if they were to make a story mode encompassing his origin, they'd have to add at least one new character that's just a worse version of ROJAK. They also can't do Balza for the opposite reason, as Balza's quote-unquote victory would be his Final Ascension, which we've already seen, and not only would it feel recycled, it'd be far more fitting for Zargora to be the focus of that story mode. So, why not have Balza's story mode being about his first arrival, and follow him going from Aegis team to Aegis team, destroying them for Giga Energy? Well, now we're at the same problem as with ROJAK, as they'd have to add several new characters to represent those teams. In fact, how could they make a conclusive story if Gigaman has such a central role in defeating Balza? And Balza is ROJAK's main rival. I believe that a ROJAK chapter would prioritize story over spectacle, as there's no way to one-up the finale of Final Ascension. Much like how Gigaman is a sort of parody of Ultraman, i.e., what if there was a superhero who'd been fighting since the 60s? ROJAK is a meta look at the Megazord, asking the question, what if 5 people really were in control of one machine? The answer is, they wouldn't get along. You don't have to look further than the Ultimate to see what I mean. It's pure chaos.
Fire! Fire! Fire!
And in the story mode, they constantly bicker with each other. So maybe that could be the arc of that chapter. Much like the lore sections, it'd focus on the team just after they'd all been brought together, and then have them develop and get along better as the story progresses, until at the end they're skilled enough to take on Balza, leading directly into Final Ascension. Now, there is a problem with choosing story over spectacle, as Gigabash lends itself to a plot based around one battle after another, not a group of people talking with each other in a base. Fortunately, there's already a solution in the game, as half the story modes are animated in 2D, specifically the human parts, because they probably didn't want to make 3D characters after seeing the Netflix Ultraman series. What really seals the deal for this being possible is this key art here. Do you notice something strange? That's right. Besides the meeps and the maps themselves, this is the only case of human characters having 3D models, which they were able to do due to all of their features being underneath their masks. Remember how we've already established that Passion Republic have been planning a new story mode since the ROJAK DLC? I think that they made the models alongside the ROJAK DLC to use in the later story mode, and since they had them lying around, they used them in this promo art. On top of that, ROJAK is one of the most unique characters in Gigabash because they have full-on voice acting.
Stop hacking me, Crown.
Guys, cool it down.
Sorry!
I know some people wanted the new story mode to have voice acting instead of just text blocks, especially after the Mighty DLC, so maybe the ROJAK chapter could fully flesh out that concept. This also applies to the theme song that plays during their ultimate, as in Final Ascension, we get the full version when they make their appearance. The actors themselves fit the pilots perfectly, and even just a couple spoken sentences can help you understand how a character behaves, and thus invest in them to a greater extent, leading to better storytelling capabilities. Of course, some of you may have noticed a critical flaw with this story mode, that being, why didn't they just make it before Final Ascension? People were asking for a new story chapter even back then, and it wouldn't make much sense for PRG to lay down all this groundwork, all this preparation, and then just abandon it for a couple years down the line. Truth be told, I don't have a solid answer to this. I have some watered down explanations, like maybe they wanted to follow up on the teasers in the Thundertrust chapter before starting a new one, or they weren't sure if their new original characters and lore would be as successful as all the licensed kaiju, but nothing that really clicks it all into place. I mean, looking over the script as I'm doing a final review, both of those examples can be easily countered. So, that's why I've just broken the pace of the video, as while this observation doesn't make it irrelevant or worth scrapping entirely, it does mean that the idea of a ROJAK story mode can be shut down rather easily. However, in the vacuum of the current roster, ROJAK has so much evidence and little hints that imply they're getting a story mode, so yeah, just take this with a pinch of salt, and sorry for interrupting the flow. When a potential counterpoint like that comes up, you can't just not include it in the discussion regardless of how silly it makes you look, you know? The pilots' voices, along with their character designs, mannerisms, and speech patterns, helps them just ooze personality. It's clear that Republic Games put a lot of passion, into fleshing them out and helping them each stand out in their own way. There's so much more depth to them in comparison with the rest of the roster, and if Thundertrust's character growth and Gigaman's arc could play out so well, imagine what the devs could do with a ROJAK chapter. But there's a key difference between ROJAK and the other heroes, that being their standout feature. They're a team, with one of the members not even being part of the mech. So, which mighty warrior would get the spotlight? Well, besides the obvious answer, there's one particular pilot that the lore entries pay extra special attention to. Let's quickly determine when this chapter will take place before we go into my proposed plan for it. Passion Republic doesn't seem to want there to be a canon ending to Gigabash, but they're okay with certain events in the past following a clear, single narrative. So I think the ROJAK campaign will be at this point in the timeline, just after the last pilot joined, but before or during the main story modes, so it can still affect ones like Final Ascension without rendering it canon. I think that the first main protagonist will be Kabuto, aka the Beetle guy and the leader. He's the Optimist commander, and he's got a lot of faith in this team's capabilities, despite what Dr. Kiniko might believe. She's the down-to-earth assistant, and while the trope of a confident leader and the less idealistic partner is quite common, it's a nice dynamic. So the main plot could be about Kabuto proving that ROJAK is capable of taking on Bolzar, with him directing the team and helping them work together until they reach that point. What's also interesting is that Kabuto didn't get the opportunity to ever pilot in an Aegis, as he was the only super warrior Japan had enough resources to train even before Bolzar attacked. So that origin, and Dr. Kiniko's lack of trust in the team, could lead to a nice amount of self-doubt and serve as a challenge for Kabuto. Now about that pilot I mentioned briefly, is the last member who joined the team, Crown. Her late arrival is probably why she pilots a giant durian, don't worry about it. She's a bit like Kabuto, as she wasn't part of any Aegis team at all, and she wasn't even a mighty warrior. Both of the two lore entries draw attention to her, with one of them taking place before she joined the team, and the second one being from her perspective as she hacks into ROJAK's files after joining. From what these entries tell us, she was a hacker in Tokyo. Kabuto believes she's the final piece of the team and the key to them working together, and she also has extreme social anxiety. The other pilots are a sergeant who refuses to stray from his code, an ex-wrestler who loves biting off more than he can chew, literally, and a self-obsessed loner celebrity, but none of them are as fleshed out as Kabuto or Crown. The story mode could share focus on the team's dynamic and their work on the field, with Kabuto and Crown having their own smaller arcs throughout. Kabuto could prove himself up to the challenge of commanding the team, and Crown could help the other pilots to start focusing on helping each other despite her anxiety and lack of experience, with the chapter ending on the team, having proved themselves capable of working together to fight a large threat, deciding to finally hunt down Bolzar, leading into Final Ascension, while not confirming it canon. Alternatively, the story mode might then lead into Final Ascension or a different play on the events in it, with ROJAK capturing up to Balzar when he arrives at Yeti Sanctuary, which would make a lot of sense with his reveal trailer. Like in Final Ascension, we see Gigaman and Thundertross tracking down Balzar, and him standing in the exact same position over the Hollow Earth entrance point, before ROJAK shows up. This was something that only clicked in my brain as I'm literally recording this video, so it may be that they end up managing to stop him there. But how will this all be packaged? Wouldn't it be weird to have a second ROJAK DLC that doesn't even unlock him? How can I be sure that Passion Republic Games is working on the new story mode? That's the neat part. I'm confident that they're not. In 2024, a new DLC was released roughly every 3 to 4 months, up to November. Then, only 2 DLCs were released in 2025, 6 months apart from each other, with the first one being the Mechagerus DLC, who was already mostly completed in the base game. At the time, I thought this was because the second 2025 DLC, the then unknown Gamera DLC, would have 4 characters, or that the rights holders were hard to negotiate with, as similar things led to the Ultraman 4-pack taking a year to come out. This significant drop-off in content was a bit doom and gloom for a while, as it seemed Gigabash, which was developed during the quarantine, was coming to a close, with the assumption that most of the team had left PRG to work on other things, or simply didn't have enough time to make new content anymore since there wasn't a lockdown going on. Thankfully, we learned that they had been making a new story chapter and 2 new maps in April, as well as the usual 2 characters, which explained why the dev cycle had slowed down after, surprise surprise, the ROJAK DLC. Anyways, I can confidently say that we are not getting a new story chapter or DLC on the scale of Final Ascension immediately, as that 3 to 4 dev cycle has seemingly resumed, with an Ultraman Zero collab arriving in early July. You know what, I made a prediction that Mothra would appear in Minus Zero in an earlier video, and in just my last upload, I made another prediction that she would be included in the new Destroy Monsters Melee remaster, which proved to be so outdated that I was able to correct myself in the same video. Let's go 3 for 3, 2026 ain't the year of Mothra for nothing. Jokes aside, this article about how Toho wants to push Mothra's brand further throughout the year has caused irreparable damage to my credibility. Anyway, if we follow the pattern of a new DLC every 3 to 4 months, we could easily get the next one in November, which in case you didn't know, is going to be the month for Toho. Just off the top of my head, we've got a new game, their first LEGO set, and one of their most anticipated movies to date with all the associated promo material. They're clearly banking on the profit margins for November being as large as possible, regardless of Jaywalking Simulator 6. It's also been literally years since their last Godzilla DLC, whereas we've just gotten Gamera and Ultraman ones. So yeah, I think that they'll do an ally pack this time, with Mothra of course, and either Rodan or the Angriest. Personally, I'd love to see a playable Jet Jaguar or Space Godzilla, even though I don't think he's counted as an ally. Oh well. So yeah, no new story mode for a while, and to keep gambling, I've gotta be right sometime. Since ROJAK and Balzar are already in the game, maybe have the new chapter pair up with the Mighty DLC for future buyers, and give anyone who's bought the Mighty DLC the option to buy just the new stuff. Not sure how that'd work, but I'm sure something could be sorted out. As I said earlier, Gigabash lends itself to a plot that consists of fighting multiple opponents in a row, for extremely obvious gameplay reasons. So, I think that this take on a ROJAK story mode, again, this is all just predictions, would include their first threat as the main challenge to overcome, and a gameplay focused plot to drive the 3 arcs. So that plot would, like most of the others, have the player going from location to location fighting various kaiju, and for the ROJAK campaign, the glue that links the levels to the story would be ROJAK's team going for numerous combat tests in the field, to train for their inevitable clash with Balzar. Since none of the other characters whatsoever interacted with ROJAK, I'm only going to have him encounter one of the chapter stars, Gorogong. This is because, like Final Ascension, I would like the next story mode to have 2 new maps, or rather, 1. The first and only new map would be my current number 1 want from Gigabash, a New York City map. The second one would hopefully be part of a free update, as one of the best updates to Gigabash added some story maps to the main selection. The map I'd like to see is, drumroll please, Mount Gorogong. I assume it was cut from both the base game and the free update due to just being a flat patch of ground, but I don't care. I want to be able to recreate the finale to King Kong vs Godzilla and Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla, to name a few. This map shows up in the extras menu alongside every other one, despite the fact that it's only in story mode, and it's not hard to see why. It showed up for 30 seconds, it's incredibly basic, and wouldn't offer much new things, if any at all. But I want it. So why not have the purple walls block off certain parts of the stage as the hazard? If that slows things down too much, then add some electric pylons instead, and fully lean into that Heisei Godzilla field set. Please speed, I need this. My theories are kinda baseless. Preferably this map will be added for free, but it might be included in the DLC to compensate for the voice acting and a more demanding story. Also, if we had ROJAK fight Gorogong here, that would still lead to him escaping with the artifact, but that would work in our favour. This would be in the first half of the story, and would show how ROJAK is failing to work together. That then keeps all the other endings open, meaning that ROJAK's story can be mostly canon regardless, and could also be a little nod and wink detail that maybe ROJAK attacking Gorogong led to him being defeated by Rora and the final ascension starting. I think that we would have to get at least one new character to serve as a villain if Balzar isn't being defeated, so why not one based on Cloverfield? That's only if they do end up making a New York map. Otherwise, a Frankenstein parody would be cool. It wouldn't shock me if two villainous kaiju appear in a DLC before a ROJAK story mode, so they could then be used in it, explaining all 4 characters' absence in the base game. But anyways, that's it for this video. Let me know if you'd like to see more Gigabash videos, or if you have any ideas for them, as I noticed that there seems to be a moderately large audience for Gigabash on YouTube, but no creators making videos like this one for them. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all later.